On the 22nd of July 2016, two games were announced at Sonic's 25th anniversary party in San Diego. One, the newest 3D title at the time, poised to be the next big adventure for the Blue Blur. The game that would ultimately become Sonic Forces. Wait, though, there's more, I promise. Because the second game was a true return to form for the series. A trailer that genuinely got me more excited than I could possibly put into words at the time. Well, okay, I did put them into words, but it was like... The words they used here were very intentional. To discover what made Sonic a gaming icon, we're going back. Sonic Mania was that second game. The crowd completely erupting at the first second of 2D gameplay. This was it. Did Sega seriously just make the smartest decision they've made possibly ever? A serious, genuine sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles? A real sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Sonic had some pretty big successes with other types of 2D and 2.5D side-scrollers. We had had the Fantastic Advance series during the GBA era. We had gotten the Rush series on the 3DS. We had gotten Sonic 4. But grew up a little bit. But all of these games still never really felt like a true successor to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that in like a literal, they did not feel like the original Mega Drive games. Sonic Advance was a great series of games that adapted a lot of Sonic's modern stylings at the time with new movesets like rail grinding into the game. A great series of original adventures on Nintendo hardware. Sega should really get around to re-releasing these at some point. Sonic Rush introduced the boost system to a 2D game, and had an excellent parkour feel to its level traversal, with airborne tricks feeling fluid and fun to pull off. Fantastic. Sonic 4? Bad Sega. You were doing so well, and then this? Okay, maybe a third entry to the episodic fourth game might have rounded this thing out into something. Maybe it would have made it better, but I kind of doubt it. I mean, this game was microwaved ass. Nothing felt like Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And honestly, I kind of expected no game to feel like Sonic 3 and Knuckles again. Until this trailer dropped. Just watching the footage of this game immediately had me going,
it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
I cannot overstate just how this trailer left me feeling. Like, looking through a window where Sonic games like this never stopped coming out. Where Sega kept dropping hit after hit. Seriously, every single Sonic fan and their mothers complain about Green Hill Zone popping up in every Sonic project these days. But when we saw the reimagined Green Hill Zone in Sonic Mania, the audience was electric. The minute Mania had a release date, I booked leave off of my job purely to make sure I could give this game 100% of my focus. And sure enough, when the game dropped a year later in 2017,
my body was ready.
And it is safe to say Sonic Mania did not disappoint. With music from Hyper Potions and T-Lopes, the absolute fucking god, with both new zones and redesigned favorites from the classic games that both feel nostalgic but brand new at the same time. To the deep cuts to things like the Sega Sonic Popcorn Maker, to the 90s catchphrases, to the goddamn Mean Bean Machine boss battle. Everything in this game is perfect. I love it so much that instead of cliff noting this game, we're gonna go through stage by stage and just talk about everything this masterpiece did in service to Sonic's long-standing legacy as a video game icon. Before the game starts, we're treated to an intro cutscene, very akin to Sonic 3's start. Sonic and Tails flying into Angel Island Zone and finding Eggman's robots excavating something. we catch a glimpse of this new red jewel before it warps us away into the first stage of Sonic Mania.
Stage 1 kicks off right where you'd expect it to. Green Hill Zone. Only this ain't your dad's Green Hill Zone, because he probably doesn't own real estate in Mobius. Unless he does. I mean, I don't know your dad. Act 1 is incredibly nostalgic, right from the starting point of the zone. Everything lovingly redone from the original game of '91. I know for some people this might be somewhat of a, well, disappointment. Mania has a general layout where the first stage is very focused on nostalgia, whereas the second stage of the zone is more about reinventing that zone. But bear in mind, this game is a celebration of the Hedgehog's 25th anniversary, so there's got to be a focus on celebrating the originals. Upon reaching the end of Act 1, we're greeted with the zone's mini-boss, the DD Wrecker. Each zone will have a mini-boss as well as a main boss at the end of the second act, keeping with tradition set from Sonic 3. And this boss is kind of a homage to the original Egg Wrecker fight from Sonic 1, just with a bit more of a twist. Though like the original, 8 hits will send these balls packing as we head into Act 2, where this zone truly shines. Act 1's mini-boss fight began as we entered the underground portion of Green Hill Zone, something that kinda reminded me of the Master System Sonic 1's Green Hill Zone. Whereas in Act 2, the zone continues on with this subterranean cave theming with beautiful new backgrounds, which I think have been inspired from the original Tokyo Toy Show demo, with the addition of these giant totem poles, as well as adding new additions to the zones like the zip lines. The zone feels a lot more vertical, which is nice, with safer pathways at the upper half of the stage, and the lower half being a lot more treacherous. Stage 2 also brings back that nasty spike bridge from Sonic 1, but this time, with the addition of Sonic 3's fire shield, we can burn that thing to the ground. Mania adds a lot of cool interactions with the elemental shields and zone traversal, and the first of these is shown off right here in the first zone. Act 2 rounds out with the zone's boss battle, which in this case was Sonic 2's penultimate boss battle, the Death Egg Robot. Kinda crazy that the final boss from Sonic 2 is only Sonic Mania's second boss in the game, but with the addition of rings, the frustration of Sonic 2's showdown is lessened significantly. The Death Egg Robot has a whole new fight for Sonic Mania, with the mech chasing you down and firing bomb salvos at you. The zone provides some high points where you can get in a couple of hits onto the robot's head, and whenever he attacks with his drill arms, you can also race up along them to get in a hit that way, eliminating that stressful gamble from Sonic 2's "Will the arm's weird hitbox clip me if I go for the belly?" Defeating Robotnik gives us a fun little cutscene of him barking orders at his new henchmen, the Hard-Boiled Heavies, before we're warped away via the Phantom Ruby to the game's second stage.
And so we arrive at Chemical Plant Zone, getting a fun little animation of the purple water dripping on Sonic as he lands in, before we kick off the stage. Now initially I had kind of mixed feelings for Chemical Plant Zone. As a kid, this zone was always an anxious one for me with its water elements, whether it be from drowning or from getting crushed by the moving platforms in that one final stretch of the zone. But Hit Cannon really won me over on this zone, and honestly, it's now one of my favorites to replay in Sonic Mania. The first act once again pays homage to both the original acts of Sonic 2, seeing the return of the zone's exhilarating loops and warp pipes. The zone is a lot of fun to blast through at high speeds, while trying to avoid the many stage hazards and drops, with the zone capping off with a showdown from a vaguely familiar face? Act 1's mini-boss is a repurposed Ice Disc from Ice Cap Zone Act 1, dipping under the blue acid before re-emerging and attacking. A pretty fun look at the Badnik, but before long we're racing into Act 2. The backgrounds shift to a more industrial vibe,
Where Act 1 felt like we were in a more urban part of the zone, Act 2 has us blazing through the internals of this place, with new gimmicks like bouncing goo lifted from Sonic CD's wacky workbench, and these syringe platforms that can change the property of that goo to make it even more bouncy. I kinda wish there were a few instances of these where they made the terrain actually hazardous for Sonic, but maybe that would make people feel more bitter towards the stage, so I can kinda understand them keeping the focus on fun for this level. We even see a new Badnik imported into the zone, the weirdly named Caterkiller Jr., which does fit the zone really well. It just makes me wonder how this thing is considered the junior to the Caterkiller. I don't know. After dropping down another pipe, we enter the stage's boss fight against Robotnik. Only instead of the traditional scoop up the goo and drop it on Sonic battle we had with him in the original game, we're instead treated to a Puyo Puyo throwdown against the Mad Doctor in what is seriously the coolest fight in the game for me. Look, you're either in the camp that loves Mean Bean Machine, or you're wrong. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules, I'm just stating the facts. And this fight is a great surprise to cap off the zone. Robotnik's AI isn't all too difficult here. In fact, I don't think I've ever lost a battle to him here. You know, unlike how much of a bastard he is in the final fight of the original Mean Bean Machine. What's really cool is after you complete this battle, you unlock the Mean Bean minigame that you can play from the Sonic Mania's extra menu. Sure, it's not quite the same depth as the original game, but I mean, it's essentially a whole free extra game mode. It's the little stuff like this that shows how much care the devs had for Sonic and his older adventures. Another cool thing about this throwdown is the boss theme here pays homage to the original game, specifically the two-player versus theme, a track that already went way harder than it had any right to. If I could ask for any kind of change here, it would only be that the sprites began to kind of panic like they did in the original game. I always love watching the AI sweat as you dumped a bucket of gray beans on them. Take that, Grounder, you bastard! When you defeat Eggman, he drops into the goo. And you zip up and out of Chemical Plant Zone and into Stage 3, the game's first original zone. The zone that set the scene for millions of Sonic fans a year before. Studiopolis Zone. This was the first zone developed for Sonic Mania and really pulls out all of the stops. Feeling like a sprawling metropolis in the midst of filming something big. You know, like Hollywood. Only without the guys in knockoff mascot costumes trying to scam money out of you for photos you felt bullied to take. Or those guys that try to give you their mixtapes. Like, what do I look like, man? A producer? I'm just a skunk. Leave me alone, man. Studiopolis is a lot of fun, featuring a bevy of great set pieces and stage design. Everything from the gimmicks to the badniks are completely unique, and with how great this stage is, I do understand why people desperately wished Mania was populated with solely unique zones. Because this zone is gorgeous! The stage has you blitzing through various buildings, teleporting through electric currents via the Hornet trucks, and has a ton of throwbacks to older Sonic and Sega stuff. And not just games either. Deep cuts like the Sega Sonic Popcorn Shop, background signs spouting lock-on technology, reminding us just how much a corporation is willing to bend a knee for those big McBucks. Even the background signs from Springyard Zone appear in the zone's mini-boss. Cope? Yeah, man, I'm trying. Speaking of, our first boss fight for the zone is against the Heavy Gunner, flanked by a squadron of egg robos and chasing us down in a custom police helicopter. He fires missiles down on us, forcing you to dodge the incoming red missiles while landing hits on the blue ones, which bounce back at him. The fight doesn't let you land multiple hits against him, but the pacing's great and doesn't overstay its welcome. After body checking the Heavy Gunner, we launch into Act 2 with some visually stunning background elements. Act 2 takes place inside of a large television studio, behind the scenes with red curtains, cables, and teleprompters everywhere. I love all the Robotnik flourishes in this zone as well. The Eggman name in the director's chair, the rubber hose style Eggman animation. Even the branding on some of the monitors have Egg TV on them. The second stage has a few more unique gimmicks as well, running along film reels and clackboards, the cable teleporters, and the massive lottery slots that you can spin down for some bonus rings. Unless you get the egg ball, in which case you lose that many rings. The zone is a blast to navigate through, and before long we reach the Act 2 boss battle against the Weather Globe, a modified version of Eggman's Eggmobile. Throughout the battle, Eggman will use one of 3 different attacks, telegraphed by our handsome weatherman, Cluckoid. It's a pretty quick battle, given you can rack up multiple hits on the boss after each attack, which brings the curtain down on Studiopolis' final boss battle, with some ear-punishing buzzing noise as a reward. A little nod to the 25th anniversary livestream, where Sega managed to botch up the audio for a good chunk of the stream. But our victory is short-lived, as the monitor in the background goes live to Flying Battery Zone, Sonic spotting the airship and running off-screen, appearing in the live feed as he jumps aboard the airship, and a fantastic transition to the game's 4th zone. And what a zone to represent Sonic and Knuckles. Flying Battery Zone is iconic for its amazing music and exhilarating stage design. When I was a kid, I always loved reaching this stage whenever I could rent Sonic & Knuckles' cartridge out from my local video store. And seeing it here in Mania with all the TLC the developers have given it makes me a very happy mammal. The opening moments of the zone feel intimately familiar with how the original zone plays out. Though when we dip out and under the airship, headcanon have done a little tweaking to make things a little less unforgiving straight off the bat, with the addition of a few more platforms to make falling off the airship a little bit harder at least. The first zone's design is pretty faithful to the originals, with its metal cylinder loops and animal capsules, but with a few new gameplay elements, like the electromagnetic ceiling now hoisting Sonic up if he's got the electric shields. And I know all the music in Sonic Mania is fire, but Flying Battery Zone music is so good. It never fails to get me feeling pumped for the challenges of this perilous zone. It's like a fun Metropolis zone. Soon enough, we're locked into the stage's mini-boss. At first glance, you'd be forgiven to think it would be a showdown with Robotnik, but as you can see with the plans on the wall, he's kinda too busy finishing up his real boss battle. So he drops you unceremoniously down into the trash below, to instead throw down with the Big Squeeze mini-boss, the Flying Battery's trash compactor. If you played the original, this boss might feel somewhat familiar to you, as this boss is loosely adapted from the original Laser Prison boss fight, and we take it down in similar fashion. With enough hits, the squeeze is spent, and we get dumped out from the bottom of the airship, getting called last minute by a grabber pack that drops us off at the beginning of Act 2. This stage feels like we're traversing through the ship's lower quarters, with trash pits full of busted badniks and broken monitors. If you look in the background, you can even see rows of animal pods moving along conveyor belts, likely being airdrops down into the zones below. Much like all the trash did from the last boss fight. You know that's illegal, Eggman! This stage has a lot more moments where we traverse the outside of the airship, all the while this massive storm has begun to kick up around Flying Battery Zone. I love the weather effects they added here, and these outside portions of the zone feel like they took a lot of inspiration from Winged Fortress Zone, with the hover platforms and clucker badniks popping up to give us hell. This zone also kind of reminds me a little of Skydeck from Sonic Adventure, though maybe that's just because I've recently replayed it. But partially because I'm always worried I'm going to fall off this thing. The electric conduits from Wacky Workbench also show up here, making you think carefully before jumping, lest you get a nasty zap and plummet to the ground below. After zipping about all over this Zeppelin, we reach the stage's final boss battle, the Spider-Mobile. Man, if naming bosses with mobile in their name was a drinking game, you get pretty sloshed, right? This boss battle is another Mania original, and I mean, it's alright. The flow of the boss battle involves you knocking the spider down, then following up and booting it into the spikes that line either side of the stage. Once you've done the battle a few times, you'll get the rhythm down pretty quickly. But man, the first time I fought this thing, I was struggling. After we land the final blow on the zone's boss, Robotnik escapes via a jetpack. A potential reference to the way he's escaping in Sonic CD. Or an even deeper reference to this concept art from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where Eggman would use his jetpack to escape from a descending flying battery zone. While we're left to escape on... Oh god, it's the gliders. The gliders from Sonic 2 on the damn Master System. Seriously, a cool throwback to a lesser-loved Sonic game, but god did these things suck to use in the original game. Mercifully though, we just need them for a quick zone transition, as we drop down into Sonic Mania's 5th zone. The gliders touch down in Sonic Mania's 2nd wholly original zone, Press Garden Zone. An industrialized ancient ruin repurposed as a printing house by Robotnik. I'm kinda surprised Eggman is still so focused on printed media in this day and age, but hey, good for him. Press Garden Zone feels like Marble Garden Zone and Launch Base Zone's chill distant cousin. It's a kind of weird combination, but I really dig the aesthetics. It's a theme that's never been kinda used in a Sonic zone before, so full points for originality. It has a lot of returning gimmicks, like the cylinder bridges from Launch Base Zone, and a cool return for our long-cut baddie Splats. Though he's trading in his little spring leg for a stamp to better fit the zone's vibe. The zone has a ton of conveyor belts, which both serve to fit the stage visually, as well as being used to achieve much higher jump heights to the player, letting them reach higher parts of the zone. The stage also has some of those infinite loop segments like Ice Cap did in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which had me stumped a little longer than I'd like to admit. The first act's boss is Shiversaw, a pretty unique fight that has you drawing its attacks away from its body so you can land a hit on its torso. When its saw blades collide with the boxes, they break, leaving you with a nice opening to get into hits. 6 hits and he's done, clearing the path for Act 2. And this is where the garden in the stage title comes into play. The wintry backgrounds look gorgeous with the vibrant red trees. I don't know why, but this whole zone really reminds me of Jazz Jackrabbit 2. I think it's something about its color palette. I don't know. The zone brings a slew of new gimmicks with it as well. My favorite of which is definitely the freezing traps. I loved getting frozen in Sonic 3 just to see that goofy little ice block animation. But now you're telling me I get to do that and not lose my rings? And better yet, it's a new method of traversing the zone? Hell yes! Other fun new elements to the zone include the wood chipper platforms, wood row, and ice bomba badniks. It really impressed me just how much the zone was able to shift from an industrial ruin to an ice level. Really masterfully done. And before you know it, we're pitted against the zone's final boss, the Heavy Shinobi. Another one of Eggman's new elite egg robos, who attacks by either freezing you with his sword or throwing out Astarians to damage you. He takes a little more thought than the zone's mini-boss, in that you have to interrupt him during his jumps, stunning him and allowing you to sneak in a hit. Rinse and repeat 7 more times and we can say sayonara to the Shinobi, clearing the zone before we run into Eggman himself. We can see on the terminal he's got the next zone all nicely picked out for us. Little Planet, Metal Sonic, before warping us away to the game's 6th zone. The Phantom Ruby spits us out into the best stage of Sonic CD, Stardust Speedway. And jumping ahead a little here, but I love how these 2 acts show off the stage from its past visual style to its present. I kinda wish the final boss battle in the 2nd act would be in the zone's bad future, but hey, it's an absolute winner of the stage. Act 1 kicks off in the zone's past, with its ancient Greek/Roman styled city beneath a beautiful night sky. Stardust Speedway's past is flush with vegetation, from a time before Eggman's influence. The Zone has a lot of Sonic CD's original Zone gimmicks, but with a few imported ones like Marble Garden Zone's pulleys and Mushroom Hill Zone's vine bridges. My favorite though has got to be the capsules that house the little planet flowers. Seeing these things again is a nice nod back to CD and the way it did things kind of differently from prior Sonic games. And busting them open not only releases those flowers, but these giant plants that Sonic can traverse. Much like a lot of Sonic CD stages, the Zone has a lot of verticality to it, and I always try and travel along the uppermost pass of the Zone, if only to see the cute little star formations that make up Sonic and the cast's heads. The Axe mini-boss battle is against a bigger version of those obnoxious little lightbug badniks, the Hotaru. The aptly named Hotaru Highwatt. The boss will periodically disappear to have us contend with some regular-sized Hotaru, dodging their attack patterns before he reappears with his own attack. After 6 hits, we take the win and zip off, destroying the stage's robot generator before flipping a future signpost, time traveling away to the Zone's second act. And I love that Hencanon went to the effort of recreating the time travel effect here, even if it's just to use for this one transition. It makes the act shift feel super fluid and really makes me wish they'd used it again for the other Sonic CD stage. But more on that later. While I love Act 1's visuals, the present-day Stardust Speedway Zone is my absolute favorite from the original game. Its golden platforms and pathways, the deep night sky illuminated by those panning spotlights. Ironically, while most of Sonic Mania's first zones are usually the ones that replicate the originals, Act 2 of Stardust Speedway is the more faithful one here, down to the starting position of the zone. I've always loved the intricate platforms of this zone. How they're this fusion of gold saxophones and horns. It's like they're visually showing us how much of this zone, hell, Sonic's identity, is in its amazing music. All of the original zone's gimmicks and badniks make a return here, with a couple new ones like the bungee rope and firework rockets to boost you up into the air. It's a high-speed, fun zone that feels like a celebration in itself, with all the staples of a good Sonic level. Loops, boost pads, and a lot of springs, like a lot of springs. After zipping in and out of the zone's internal structures, we reach the zone's metal Sonic projector, destroying it and seriously ticking off our high-speed metal rival. Metal Sonic appearing to give us a sassy little finger wag before kicking off a race with our doppelganger. This portion of the boss battle pays homage to the original zone's final battle, before ducking inside to part 2 of the fight, where Metal Sonic connects himself up with the robot generator to mass-produce some Silver Sonic bots to take us down. This whole section of the fight has 2 awesome nods back to past Sonic media. Firstly, the robot generator Metal is connected to is the same robot generator in the Fantastic Sonic OVA movie. And the second are those little noodly-armed Silver Sonics, who were the first ever Metal Sonics Eggman created back in Sonic 2 on the Master System. We use these little guys like pinballs, bouncing them up to damage the Metal Sonic while he's locked into the robot generator. After 4 hits, the generator overloads, forcing Metal Sonic to disconnect and take the battle back on the road. Once we reach the top of the Speedway, Eggman's waiting for us, to give Metal Sonic a serious boost via the Phantom Ruby, powering him up into his final form, Metal Sonic Kai. Okay, they call him Giga Metal here in Mania, but he is heavily inspired by the final boss in Knuckles Chaotix. Once Metal Sonic gets the Kaiju blow-up, he stomps behind us, tearing up the ground and firing beams out at us. Despite his stature though, 8 hits will have him give up the race, reverting to his base form before plummeting down to the ground below. With the battle won and another warp from the Phantom Ruby, we wave farewell to Stardust Speedway and on to the next zone. Hydro City Zone, the 7th zone on our journey through Sonic Mania, and one of the greatest they could have chosen from Sonic 3. Seeing the stage again was another huge treat for me, as I've always felt that the best water-based Sonic stage is this bad boy right here, followed by Tidal Tempest Zone. and I will be taking no questions on this. Our return to these ancient Echidnian ruins sees the return of all of the original Zone's gimmicks and badniks, though with a couple of new additions to the stage, like the drainage hooks, boats, spear traps, gelignite badniks, and the bubble switches that let you float around and traverse the underwater sections of the zone. Compared with some of the other zones, not a lot has really been changed here, but to be fair, it's pretty hard to improve on perfection. An interesting thing to point out is, if we were to view Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles as separate games, this is the only zone that's actually taken from Sonic 3 itself. Which is kind of weird when you think about it. Man, if they ever make a sequel to Mania, they gotta pick up Ice Cap Zone. As long as Sega doesn't, screw them over with the music. Moving on, one extra Easter egg this zone used to feature was this goofy sound clip of Donkey, which would replace the speed booster sound effects of the stage. Sadly, the cheat code to activate this little Easter egg got patched out in the 1.03 update of the game. It did last a tiny bit longer on the Switch version, but once Mania Plus dropped, the code was gone on all versions, which was honestly kind of a shame. The sound effect is still in the game's files, and there's probably a way to mod the code back in, I'd expect. Sadly, there isn't a way to mod a better opinion of Sonic Adventure into Donkey, so it is what it is. After hydroplaning across the zone's highs and lows, we reach the Act 1 mini-boss. Another Mania original. Kind of. See, the boss battle is essentially the Egg Vortex from Sonic 3. Only Sonic did that one meme where he's like, "Look at me! I am the boss now!" See, this time we have the Egg Vortex, and Robotnik has a very fitting scuba suit. I don't know, there's just something weirdly funny about knowing he just owns this scuba suit. Like, do you think it's like his hobby outside of bullying a 3-foot hedgehog? Like, his Monday to Fridays are making these giant robot death machines, but then on Sunday he catches up with Dr. Wily and is like, "Albert, you would not believe the week I've had, but look, let's just enjoy the beautiful coral reef." 4 hits to beat him. Which, I mean, shouldn't surprise you. He's face-checking a steel propeller here. Letting us move on to Act 2. Act 2 hits us with some of the series' best music, boosting into the zone and seeing some new elements to the stage already with the collapsing pillars. Though the sadist in me will kinda miss the iconic Crusher Wall sequence from the original Act 2. The rotating pipe platforms make their return here and show off just how damn good Sonic's new sprite work looks. I always love these things in the way they simulated that 3D effect back on the Mega Drive original hardware. The stage, like Act 1, is incredibly fluid, no puns intended, with multiple different paths and high and lower portions of the zone, allowing you to bypass some of the later water sections if you can stay high enough. Before long, though, we're dropped down into the water to square off against Eggman in the zone's final boss battle. And this battle is quite the gauntlet. Initially kicking off with Eggman chasing us down in his Laundromobile, an underwater sub that pressures us down the underwater channels of Hydro City. Activating the bombs and letting them hit the sub will both damage the boss and give you some much needed air to continue the battle. After 6 hits, the sub is sunk. Or so we thought, quickly re-emerging for part 2 of this battle, in a battle that mixed the original mini-boss fight from Hydro City Zone, the Big Shaker. After 8 more hits though, Eggman retreats, netting us the win and our last look at Hydro City Zone. A wall breaking in the side of the boss chamber and transitioning us into the tornado, flying us and oh no! Bye, Knuckles! The Hard-Boiled Magician gives us a quick little fedora tip before dropping off a Caterpillar and pulling a quick disappearing act on us. Mirage Saloon Zone Act 1 takes a lot of cues from Sky Chase Zone from Sonic 2, even down to some of the badniks present in the zone. Tails flies us around as we knock down badniks and avoid projectiles. The music goes hard as we soar through this desertscape, which looks an awful lot like the missing Sonic CD stage, Desert Dazzle. A fun fact, when Christian Whitehead was working on the Sonic CD remakes for phones, he wanted to add in this missing zone, but sadly didn't get the go-ahead at the time. A part of me wonders if that's why we have Mirage Saloon Zone here. But either way, it's a great zone and another Mania original. I love the little helmet and goggles Tails is wearing in this stage, another small throwback to the Sonic OVA movie. Soon enough we catch up with Eggman, who's driving a train full of oil tankers. Tails dropping us off here for a bit of light platforming to stretch out legs, before we're launched back into the air again and onto the tornado, just in time for the Hard-Boiled Magician's return. Dropping off another Caterkiller, however this one's it's a little bigger this time. Now I bet you're wondering why the Magician dropped off 2 of these Caterkillars, huh? Well, if we were playing as Knuckles right now, we'd have experienced an entirely different first act, which culminates in him defeating the first Caterkiller. Unfortunately for us though, the Magician bore a spare. The Uber Caterkiller is a throwback enemy from the Master System games, but completely retooled for this fight, jumping out of the sand to try and knock us in the tornado out of the skies. But after a couple of well-timed hits to the head, this boss is bested, as he just kinda floats there, before exploding into scrap. After the boss battle, we get another— Yo, is that fucking Bean?
What the fuck?
Yeah, Bean the Dynamite. You'd think he'd be Bean the Woodpecker, right? Like, that's been the naming convention in Sonic since, forever. But no, it's the Dynamite. And that's because the original game he was in was Dynamite Ducks. Yeah, ducks. He's a duck in the original game, despite being labeled as a woodpecker now. Like, check his Wikipedia. Listen, don't think too hard on it, okay? Because Sega sure as hell didn't. He's just gonna blow up the tornado and send us plummeting down to the beginning of Mirage Saloon Zone's Act 2. Continuing on foot now, we get to experience the zone how Knuckles has been since Act 1. And this zone is a real treat, with a ton of references to the unused desert levels for both Sonic 2 and Sonic CD, but now with a more cowboy western twist, featuring wanted posters for Fang, Bean, and Bark, pistol launchers, spinning barrels, and these great little bar decorations and seats. The zone is obviously a lot less linear than Act 1, given we're not locked into a side-scrolling stage. And it also made me realize, why don't we get more desert zones? Like, did Sandopolis really poison the well that much for people? Like, outside of that and the adventure games, every other desert stage has been cancelled. Well, at least that left the Mania team with plenty of freedom for designing the zone. One of my favorite little elements in the zone are these heavy king paintings where the eyes will follow you when you move. I kinda wish egg robos would bust out from behind these to attack you, but even as just a zone decoration, they're great. Soon enough we reach the Act 2 boss battle. The stage is set for a magical performance by our newest frenemy, the Hard-Boiled Magician, who calls upon his 3 helpful assistants, Fang, Bark, and Bean, each of them having their own unique attack patterns. Though on hit, we quickly discover that the trio are just illusions the magician dons to disguise himself, knocking them off of him and making him vulnerable to our attacks. This fight is, well, honestly pretty easy. You can just bum rush this guy and get in a lot of hits on him really quickly. But seeing these past characters from Sonic's history is awesome, especially given that we hadn't seen 2 of these characters since Sonic the Fighters. And we've only really seen Fang re-emerge recently in Sonic Superstars. Man, I really love it when Sega bring back Sonic's extended cast of friends and foes. There's such a deep well of amazing and beloved diverse characters. Oh wait, sorry. This game was made by Headcanon. Sega just, keeps these poor little bastards in a box somewhere in storage. But, let's get back on track. After we send the Hard-Boiled Magician packing, we jump into one of those pistol launchers, firing ourselves off into the distance as the sun sets on Mirage Saloon Zone. Oil Ocean... Aw, really? Oil Ocean Zone? I mean, the cheeky train with the oil tanks in Mirage Saloon Zone Act 1 was some great foreshadowing. The tanks even matching the zone's green and purple coloring, and with that OOZ in the corner of the tanks being short for Oil Ocean Zone. But like, I don't know, man, even then, this is not my favorite stage for Sonic 2 by a large margin. But I will say that the Mania devs did a great job of polishing up this zone into something that's a lot more fun to traverse. And visually, Oil Ocean Zone is very striking. Its orange skies behind the purple and green steel of Eggman's factory is definitely standing out, with the extra detail added to the zone's backgrounds as well, featuring these massive oil tanks with the Eggman Empire logos on full display. Act 1 feels like headcanon took the best parts of both of the original acts for Oil Ocean Zone, but then extended the zone's length even further. We see a return of the Aquas and Octus Badniks, as well as a fresh zone import in the Gola Badnik. Which I mean, if you look at this guy, it kind of feels like a potential disaster just waiting to happen. Speaking of, the addition of the fire shield here in this zone really makes traversing it a lot more fun than the original. The minute our shield touches the oil slides, everything ignites, making for quite the spectacle. Just, make sure you don't lose that fire shield, because, well, otherwise you've just made a massive hazard for yourself. In terms of zone layout, Oil Ocean is pretty linear compared to the previous zones, but still has a few optional paths here and there. Before long, we reach the zone's mini-boss, a retake on the Hey-Ho boss from Sonic & Knuckles. Though it looks like he's traded in the axe for a spanner and overalls, donning the new moniker of the Meter Droid. This boss will either huck a spanner at you like a boomerang, or he'll man the steam vents, which fires the platforms along the bottom of the stage upwards into the spikes on the ceiling. After 6 hits, we put the Meter Droid into early retirement. Though it looks like all those explosions aren't exactly good for the zone's climate, flooding the stage with fire and smoke as we kick off Act 2. Now, Act 2 is a pretty stark contrast to the first, which now feels pretty tame by comparison. The entire oil refinery ablaze as we struggle our way through the hazards and badniks to get out of this place. This stage implements the Studiopolis Act 2 switch gimmick, which, when pulled, will flush the smoke away and allow us to see clearly again. At least for a while. Ignoring the switches will also slowly drain your rings, so definitely jump on them any chance you get. This zone borrows a couple of Studiopolis gimmicks actually on that note, with the oil stream gimmick like the sand stream gimmick from the original. Though my favorite zone gimmick are these cool submarines, which are inspired from the cruise ships in Marina Madness and Knuckles Chaotix, acting as both a transition and a little mini stage in itself. Albeit a pretty blink and you miss it one. On that note though, I kind of wish Chaotix had gotten an actual stage in Mania. But again, a great idea if a sequel does ever emerge. After zipping through this hazardous zone, we reach the Act 2's boss battle, the Mega Octopus. A pretty fun little showdown. The boss borrows some attacks from both Sonic 2 and 3, from the Egg Mariner and the Heat Hands respectively. After 8 hits, we defeat the Kraken, sending it down to the oil depths below as we pop the animal capsule, and climb aboard one of the submarines docked at the plant, heading off to the game's 10th zone. Now this is more like it. Lava Reef Zone is the 10th zone in Sonic Mania, and an absolute classic from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. This subterranean zone is set deep beneath the surface of Angel Island Zone and the base of an active volcano. With its channels of molten lava and dense rock, it's always a zone I'm happy to return to, despite being a pretty hazardous foray. Act 1 is the sort of entrance to the zone, a sprawling labyrinthian cave system with old wooden platforms, assumedly there long before Robotnik showed up. Coupled with the metal fences, mining equipment, and keep out signs, it's pretty clear Eggman has been hard at work down here. probably where he was trying to pinpoint the Master Emerald Shrine. This first act features a lot of elements and returning gimmicks from the original first act of the Lava Reef Zone. Lava pools, fireball launchers, magma springs, and of course the badniks from the original zone, like those pesky mold badniks that blow up when you get too close. But with a new inclusion of Rexon from Sonic 2. This guy always kind of stood out in Hilltop Zone, but he feels right at home in the lava channels of this stage. We also bump into the rock drills a couple of times in the zone, creating tremors and pitfalls as they dig up the unstable ground below them, usually ending up destroying themselves in the lava. Rule 1 of Minecraft, buddy. The zone has a couple of optional routes and secrets to explore, and is a lot more fun if you manage to have a fire shield along the way. But before long, we reach the Axe Boss Arena, squaring off against the Drill Droid, essentially the bigger brother of those rock drills we've been seeing throughout the zone. At the start of the fight, this guy is completely impervious to our attacks, so we have to use the arena to our advantage, baiting the boss into drilling into magma pockets that cause its armor to break, while making sure the boss doesn't crush us or hit us with any falling debris. Once its heavy armor is breached, which takes about 3 digs, 6 is our magic number of hits to scrap this sucker, capping off Act 1, the lava cooling and going dark as we venture deeper into the zone, down into the beautiful abyss of Act 2. Act 2 kicks off with that beautiful, haunting music. The zone's brilliant blue rocks and crystals giving off this sense of wonder and exploration. I absolutely love this act. In the original game, this was the zone that would lead up to the Hidden Palace Zone. Not the scrap zone from Sonic 2, of course, but the place where Knuckles and Sonic would end up duking it out. The 3 zones back to back was some amazing background storytelling that we experienced while playing the game. So being back here again is like a comfort zone to me. The Mania devs added a couple of new elements to the zone, like the conveyor belts straight out of Quartz Quadrant Zone, a zone also very crystal focused, so they fit in like a glove, acting like a sorting system to the rocks mined from Eggman's excavations. The zone is wrought with hazards like flamethrowers, crushing platforms, and that still very present threat of lava. But like, man, this zone's music always makes me feel so comfortable. That soulful electric guitar against the bass, it's hauntingly beautiful, and amidst the series' best, in my opinion. We ascend up Act 2 vertically, like we're climbing out of the zone itself, the background shifting as we get higher, the dark caves giving way to the clear night sky, transitioning through a tunnel and entering a new part of the area. The ground and platforms here matching the original Hidden Palace Zone briefly, before we head on to the boss arena, kicking off our battle with the Heavy Rider, another member of the Hard-Boiled Heavies, riding atop her Motobug and swinging her mace. Hitting the Motobug mount, Jimmy, will only result in Sonic bouncing off harmlessly, so you kinda need to strategize when you're going to hit the rider, while avoiding their attacks and stage hazards. The Hard-Boiled Heavy Rider will sometimes trigger these when driving along the upper route of the arena. After 8 hits, the rider is defeated, fleeing as her Motobug Jimmy races off on his own. Now, if we were playing as Knuckles, we'd be experiencing a very different battle in this zone, as Knuckles instead does battle with the Heavy King, a fight exclusive to his playthrough of the game. See, Knuckles manages to intercept the Heavy King, who was on his own little mission to snatch up the Master Emerald. Knuckles catching him in the act and throwing down with him. This fight is a pretty cool nod to Knuckles' original final battle against Mecha Sonic, as the Heavy King can harness the Master Emerald's energy, albeit not to the extent of Mecha Sonic, as he's not invincible, floating around and attacking Knuckles with a variety of magic-based attacks from his staff, before having to retreat back to the Master Emerald to recharge. What I really love about this extra fight is just how much lore we can glean from this short battle. The stage in which Knuckles and the Heavy King duke it out on is the original Master Emerald Chamber, with the 7 Super Emeralds surrounding it as they did back in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But something's off about them. Their color completely drained and their surfaces disheveled and cracked. The devs actually had wanted to have Hypersonic and Knuckles return for Sonic Mania, but Sega essentially said, he's not on the table anymore. The game actually having a lot of cut assets that mention Hypersonic in name. But alas, the Hyperforms got left out of this adventure. But back again to our present timeline of events. Sonic and Tails gaze up at the mechanized little planet in the sky, its lights glittering as we fade to black, rounding off Lava Reef Zone as we head into the next zone.
Metallic Madness Zone. A stage I wasn't all too acquainted with from when I was a kid, admittedly. Sure, I owned Sonic CD and played it a ton, but I never actually managed to beat the Metal Sonic race at Stardust Speedway back then. Chalk it up to being a dumb kid, I guess. This death trap-riddled factory is the penultimate zone in Sonic Mania, with the zone looking as though it's somewhere between the zone's past and present, with the background showing cranes and construction work amidst the gigantic machines. The stage reminds me a lot of Scrap Brain Zone from Sonic 1, with its giant buzzsaws and crushers, a grueling gauntlet of traps and obnoxious badniks. The Matryoshka bombs, the Scarab and the spikes they move along, the Mecha-Boos and their buzzsaws, and my least favorite of the bunch, the pipe with knife. Yeah, this thing. Fuck this thing. As for stage gimmicks, the first stage introduces these red and blue seesaws, where if you jump on them, they'll launch you into the background plane of the zone, where you continue to navigate until you find another one to return yourself back to the foreground. It's a cool gimmick, though admittedly it does make parts of the zone look a little too cluttered for my liking. One thing I really love about this zone is the stage's music, with an underlying lyric track of Sonic rapping about living in the fast lane. I do wonder if this and the Act 2 music having lyrics are a little throwback to one of the secret passcode screens in Sonic CD, which featured DJ Sonic with Eggman on the records behind him. Man, all of those end screens were awesome. Though that creepy-ass one with the messed-up face really freaked me out when I stumbled across it as a kid. Before long, we reached the end of Act 1, capped off with a showdown with Robotnik. This time with another familiar boss battle, the Egg Pistons MK2, an upgraded version of the final boss from Sonic 1. This battle's a lot about patience, as one of the two pistons that will try to crush you will contain Robotnik, giving you a chance to hit him, while avoiding being flattened into a hedgehog pancake. Between attacks with the crusher and the lights on either side of the arena sending down red energy spheres to try and catch you off guard, which takes a little planning to avoid. After landing 4 hits on Eggman, the machine starts to go haywire, short-circuiting and causing the pistons to go wild, attacking much faster than they were before. But keeping a level head is key to landing the remaining 4 hits, finally destroying the death trap and completing Act 1. Act 2 kicks off and I can't lie, I really wish they had done another time travel transition into the zone's bad future or something. Like, maybe they thought it might feel too samey, which I can understand. I just kind of wish we'd get to see a little more of it is all. The layout of Act 2 is pretty similar to the level layout for the original Act 2 of the zone on the Sega CD. The stage is a pretty linear one thanks to the new gimmick of the zone, a returning one from the original, the Shrink Ray, which zaps you into a little chibi version of Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles. Definitely my favorite part of the whole zone. When you're small, you have some preset pathways and challenges you have to overcome before you reach a door that zaps you back to your original size. All the badniks in the zone return, even the goddamn pipe with knife bastard, and those same hazards from the first zone are still a constant threat, making the stage a pretty brutal one to explore. But damn does the Act 2 music rock, with Robotnik not missing a beat to throw shade back at Sonic with the backing lyrics. The music having an overall more menacing theme to it, until we hit that fantastic sax solo. After we finish traversing the zone's traps, we reach the stage's final battle. Only we're still tiny.
Oh no.
This fight is such a fun idea. Robotnik is piloting a newly customized Eggmobile, the Gacha Pandora. Because of our diminutive stature, we can't actually jump high enough to deal damage to Robotnik directly. Instead, only able to turn the crank on the mobile, which dispenses a miniaturized version of some past boss battles. The Egg Drillster from Sonic 2, the Egg Scorcher from Sonic 1, and the Amy dolls. Kamikaze Amy doppelgangers that will try and attach themselves to you before exploding. A cool blend of ideas from the Tails doll in Sonic R, and how Amy would hug Sonic if he stopped and stood still during the early stages of Sonic CD. After Eggman is out of little baby bosses, we can finally land blows on the machine, destroying the foul game of chance and bringing about an end to Metallic Madness Zone. We pop the animal capsule and get a glimpse at the game's final zone. Remember that 3D model Eggman was working on earlier? Well, Titanic Monarch is the final zone of Sonic Mania, and a wholly original one at that. Sonic working his way up this industrial vertical zone, with Eggman's newest monstrosity towering over us in the first act's background. This is what Robotnik has been working on all throughout Mania. And while we don't really get any direct measurements of this absolute unit, if we think back to how big the Death Egg robot was when we fought it in Green Hill Zone, this thing is easily 10 times the size of that thing. The Titanic Monarch is a pretty perilous zone to traverse, with some of the zone's gimmicks drawn straight from Sonic 3 and Knuckles' bonus stages, like the magnetic spheres and bumper walls, which complement its many spike pits, electrical conduits, crushing floors, and the Egg Robo Transporters. The zone's badniks are all newcomers. Well, okay, besides the Ball Hog, who's back from Sonic 1. We've got the Flasher, Turbo Turtle, and the Sentry Bug. And I don't think I've ever seen get its attack off. Mostly because if you get too far away from him, he just kind of stops with the attack. The Axe music, aptly named Built to Rule, has some great final zone weight to it. I could definitely imagine hearing this song on the OG Mega Drive hardware. This zone's music was actually Christian Whitehead's personal favorite of the Sonic Mania soundtrack. And since we're on the topic, when Christian Whitehead pitched the Sonic CD remaster back in 2011, he had wanted to include a new final zone, Final Fever. And while Sega shot that down, it looks like some of the assets from that original zone have found new life here in Titanic Monarch. As we reach the peak point of the level, we can enter the mech. That is, if we can get past the gatekeeper.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
The first Axe boss showdown is with a familiar, Eye? Red Eye from Sonic 3 and Knuckles returns here, relocated from the Death Egg to serve as the guardian to the Titanic Monarch, though with its moveset expanded on from the first battle against him. Once he's out of balls, he breaks free from his pillar to float around the stage and fire down on you. 8 hits will finish the Red Eye, rounding out Act 1 with an end-of-act transition that elevates us up and inside the Titanic Monarch itself. Act 2 takes place inside the Titanic Monarch. This sort of factory meets church, almost? With its stained glass windows and endless array of machines. The zone has a pretty unique style and layout, which is centered around a sort of hub room, and you warp to different parts of the stage via these Phantom Ruby portals, assumedly parts of the giant mech, completing them one after another until the final way opens to the boss. You can tackle these 4 routes in any order you want, but I never remember which one is which, so, into the purple swirly hole. I do really like the kind of theme to this stage, but the 4 areas we entered don't feel awfully distinct. I feel like this would have been a cool way to have a final showdown with each of the Hard-Boiled Heavies, and I kind of wonder if that was the initial plan. The main hub of the stage features stained glass depictions of all of the heavies. The final boss has us fighting them momentarily, but before you can defeat any of them, you get warped out of their arenas. I kinda wished that's how this zone played out, but maybe it ended up being too much of a gauntlet this way. Who can say? Once you've cleared all 4 routes, a purple portal appears in the center of the room, warping you to Robotnik for the stage's final battle. In what's kind of a tame final showdown, admittedly. Robotnik bounces about in the Phantom Egg, this Phantom Ruby-powered baby carrier, electrifying his cables to try and hit us, which leaves himself open afterwards for a hit or two, occasionally mixing things up with a missile volley. After we've landed a few hits, he'll jump into the background and use the Phantom Ruby to warp you to one of 4 mini-fights with one of those Hard-Boiled Heavies I mentioned earlier. Each one can be damaged, but you're never in their arenas long enough to actually destroy these guys. Again, why I think they were initially intended to have more of a fleshed out showdown. Eventually warping back to Robotnik and resuming the fight. After a couple more hits, you break the cables attached to his suit, which makes him even easier to land hits on. This fight can go on for a hot minute with all the teleporting involved, but at least the battle music's pretty great. When Robotnik fires his missile volleys down at you, the small targeting symbols are actually a cool reference to Sega Sonic Arcade, proving that even in this game's final moments, the throwbacks never let up. Soon enough though, Robotnik takes his final hit. And if you manage to secure all 7 Chaos Emeralds, you'll be treated to the game's real final battle. With 7 emeralds in hand, we reach the game's true final zone, Egg Reverie, a void in space-time where Robotnik and the Hard-Boiled King do battle for control over the Phantom Ruby. Each hit on the boss will have them tag out for control of it, a lot like Sonic Rush's final battle where you alternated between Eggman and Mega. This zone has unique controls as Super Sonic, being able to fly akin to hypersonic abilities in Doomsday Zone, as well as boosting forward at the cost of 5 rings, which I really gotta recommend you use sparingly, if at all. The zone's music has some limited vocals that kind of invoke the adventure-era super battles for me. Within the game files, there are actually a lot more tiles and floors for this zone, which makes me think there may have actually been more of a stage planned for this showdown. But honestly, it's a great final battle and a perfect way to round out this fantastic game. As the ending cutscene rolls, the final shots show us Sonic traveling through yet another Phantom Ruby warp portal, which leads into classic Sonic's appearance in Sonic Forces. Yeah, Sega wanted to tie this masterpiece in with Sonic Forces, but honestly, if they made a 2D game of this quality for every 3D game that dropped, with the only caveat being that it needed to tie in with the latest 3D release, I think I speak for all of us when I say, just fucking do it, Sega! Sonic Mania is the perfect storm of Sonic games to me. It had the right team, the right mindset, and dropped at the right time to really bring back some much-needed positivity to the Sonic fanbase. While not all Sonic fans are going to agree on, well, everything, what we can all agree on is that all we want out of this series is great games and fantastic music. Before Sonic Mania dropped, I honestly lost hope in ever really seeing a Sonic game in the same vein as 3 and Knuckles. I figured Sega would never stop to look back at its best successes, and just keep on powering forward. But Mania proved the pessimist in me wrong, and made me so much happier for it. I think Sega can learn a lot from its past successes. The original series, the adventure era, the comics, the TV shows. Sonic means a lot of different things to different people. But it's not impossible to please them all,
It just takes a level of care and understanding of why these people still love this series to this day. Needless to say, Mania was a phenomenal success, which spawned some fantastic DLC for the game, which brought in new 2-playable characters in both Mighty and Ray, a new game mode in Encore mode, and even a new zone in Angel Island. Though it's kind of brief. And if you've been watching this video from beginning to end, I hope you've kept your eyes peeled for the CD key I've hidden away within the video. I love this game, and if you've never gotten around to giving it a try, I hope you can take this opportunity to give it a go. Normally when I finish off these kinds of videos, I pose the question of, should you play this game? But I mean, do you really think I'd make this entire video worshipping every element of every stage of this game just to tell you not to play it?
Maybe.
Sonic Mania is the shining example of Sonic games being done right. It has perfect or near perfect scores across every review site on the internet. You know, if you care remotely about these publications and what they say. And if I would only recommend 3 Sonic games from the entire series, Mania would absolutely be one of them. And I think that's about it for this one. I hope you've enjoyed my unfiltered praise of this modern Sonic classic. How did Sonic Mania rank for you in terms of the best Sonic games in the series? Did you play it on release? Or hold out till the Encore DLC dropped? Or have you never played it before? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to find the CD key for the game hidden within this video. All you need to do is find the 3 sections of the CD key, punch them into Steam, and wham! It's yours. Enjoy. And, well, until next time everybody, take care of yourselves.